What is Japan famous for?
Sushi.
Seriously, what is it famous for?
Sushi.
Okay, the modern variety of sushi known as nigiri sushi was finalized in the late 1940s. Bite-sized pieces, chopsticks and all. But that's a story for another day. The history of Japan is unique, turbulent, captivating in spots, featuring a long period of steadfast isolationism. But is it famous for its architecture?
Is it?
No, not really. The historic built environment of Japan is unique, and unlike the Greek, English, or Aztec built environment, it's not even proto-architecture. It's something completely different. As for actual architecture, roughly speaking, Japan started late and put a hold on it early. But those glorious 40 years, unprecedented and unmatched.
You mean the Meiji period?
The Meiji period, yes. It goes to show what a single country can achieve when the talented and determined portion of the population is granted access to information, resources, and a high degree of artistic and engineering freedom. And the elite is actually helpful rather than dismissive. Even mainstream historians agree that Japan was populated roughly at the same time as the American continent, where up north there existed a land bridge where the Bering Strait is now. There was another one, or a series of them, connecting southern Japan to the Korean peninsula. Some folks fed up with Siberia and eager to leave chose the northern route and migrated to the continent. Others opted for the southern route and ended up in Japan. Yes, the Inca, Maya, Aztecs, and the Japanese are in fact cousins. How close or distant seems to be up to debate, but that's immaterial. As for isolation, there are degrees. This might surprise you. Pre-Columbian Mesoamerica was far more isolated from the rest of the world than Japan.
How can you say that?
Well, the 70-mile swath of rainforest known as the Darien Gap, one of the least hospitable places on Earth, served as a near impenetrable barrier. Interactions with the southern neighbors were severely limited. There was no trade route. As for the northern territories, the conditions were unfavorable, the distances enormous. The Maya and Aztecs viewed the north as the land of barbarians with limited resources.
That's not very nice now, is it?
No, it isn't. Conversely, Japan's connection with the continent was never severed. Interactions were frequent, trade routes existed, military alliances were periodically formed, which is why, for instance, archaeologists and other unsavory characters do occasionally light upon Roman artifacts and coins in Japan. Which isn't to say that some Japanese wayfarers journeyed habitually all the way to Rome to take selfies in front of Hadrian's Pantheon. The Great Silk Road was kind of a relay race. Romans to Arabs, Arabs to Indians, Indians to Chinese or Korean merchants, and there's the Japanese visitor purchasing something from them at the marketplace. Roman glass especially was popular.
Roman glass. So beautiful.
Oh, shut up.
You shut up, geez.
May I go on?
Fine.
Thank you. So, while the isolation in the Maya's case was forced upon them by nature and geography, Japan's isolation was the elite's conscious choice. They embraced Buddhism and then modified it slightly to suit their elite's important needs. Following which, they sent a message to the rest of the world. Limited contact is okay, but we don't want you here. No migrants, no immigrants. This is our land. Stay away. The built environment of Japan through the centuries was quaint, by no means ugly, and highly practical. Most of it was just makeshift construction. And there's a very good reason for that. While the place looks lush and green from above, all that greenery is sitting on top of volcanic terrain. The interior is an unbroken chain of steep mountains and volcanoes, some of them active. Because the slopes are so precipitous, They are prone to severe landslides during earthquakes and typhoons. Pretty much the entire population and almost all of its agriculture is crammed into the remaining flat coastal pockets and narrow river valleys. The Inca, yes, they had terrace agriculture, but they grew dry crops like potatoes, maize, and beans. Water just needed to filter through the terrace. Japanese signature crop is wet paddy rice. Rice paddies must be completely flooded with several inches of standing water for months at a time.
Architecture then?
The Japanese built environment was in keeping with those conditions. Stone buildings were rare. A few castles belonging to nobility cobbled together without mortar so that they could withstand earthquake damage. All other structures were small, made from timber and paper, and semi-portable. When an earthquake hit and your house, ie in Japanese, when it fell down, you could just pick up the pieces, move them to a different location, and reassemble. Which is why it's so incredibly easy to build sets for Giacomo Puccini's Madama Butterfly. It's just a bunch of movable paper screens and lighting. There was no need for Western-style furniture. Everyone sat on the floor on a tatami mat or ate on the floor using zens, small individual lacquer trays with 4-inch legs, slept on the floor using a futon, a thick mattress, shikibuton, and quilt, kakebuton, filled with cotton or hemp straw. At daybreak, the entire bed was rolled up and tucked away into a built-in sliding wall closet. So was everyone happy? Despite Confucius, Sento, and Buddhism, every form of
Feudal servitude?
and every form of
Forced labor?
known to man was practiced in Japan and wasn't perceived as something unseemly. Another spicy point here is that, Buddhism or not, the country's history is fraught with unceasing, highly cruel military adventures that went on for centuries. This naturally led to the appearance of a well-established military class known as the samurai. They ruled, they delivered ultimate justice with impunity to anyone who annoyed them, but they also maintained strict order and enforced the isolationist policy.
Aesop approves.
Yeah, I hope so. In spite of that, there was literacy. Borrowing the hieroglyphics from the Chinese, Japan turned them into a syllabic alphabet. 2 alphabets, actually. The samurai didn't mind. In fact, they were the most literate class of all. Communications, the ability to read orders, etc. And Japan had world-class metallurgy, way ahead of most countries.
But no architecture to speak of?
None, just those astonishingly clever structures. They had horses, short-legged Siberian steppe horses, known for their high endurance threshold, except they weren't used as beasts of burden. Large carts and wagons for traveling long distances were impractical. Roads, paths really, they were narrow, and building bridges was strictly forbidden, lest a warring pack of samurai should use them to sneak up on the competing outfit or the emperor. Occasionally those horses were used as pack animals, but mostly they were a means of individual transportation, voiture particulier, for nobles and the samurai. Even so, the wheel was not merely known in Japan, it was widely used in watermills. The mills ground rice. Rice was everything. Rice farmers were, in fact, a highly respected class, above artisans and certainly above merchants, who were comically the lowest class. So, starting in the 17th century, when the Baroque period was in full swing in France and Italy, beginning of the Edo period. Edo is the old name for Tokyo. Japan lived in relative peace and isolation and developed some cultural habits unheard of on this planet since ancient Rome, such as daily bathing. Heating water at home was a dangerous proposition given that your home was planks and paper. Home cooking was strictly regulated, specifically because in a place where earthquakes and typhoons are already making life difficult, house fires are the last thing you need. But there were bathhouses, Sento, tons of them. They were viewed the way taverns, saloons, and later cafes were viewed in the rest of the world, as informal social clubs, neighborhood hangouts. You dropped by at least once a day. The washing area featured large wooden troughs filled with hot water. You'd use a small wooden bucket or ladle to scoop the water from them. You'd sit on a small wooden stool and pour the water over yourself to wash away surface dirt and sweat before stepping into the main bath. You'd use rice bran, nuka, packed into small cloth bags, or abrasive clay to clean your skin. Following which, you'd jump into the co-ed pool, men and women. Nudity was not an issue. You were expected to keep your eyes at eye level. It was the polite thing to do. You'd drop by before work or after work, oftentimes both. You'd confab, have drinks, and make friends. In winter, Japanese winters are harsh. You'd go to your favorite bathing place to get a good dose of warmth before bed. At home, heating was limited. That's right. Throughout the Edo centuries, Japan was hygienically impeccable, the cleanest country in the world.
Weren't those architecture, those bathhouses?
I wouldn't call them architecture, but the engineering was top notch. Extremely clever, highly imaginative. In the 17th and 18th centuries, a Japanese bathhouse was a structure with two floors. Remember the earthquakes. Always remember the earthquakes. Japanese craftsmen used floating foundation called ishidate. They dug shallow pits and filled them with gravel, then used wooden rammers to pound the earth until it was sufficiently dense. A flat-topped block of granite was placed directly on top, no mortar. The structural wood columns were then placed directly on top of these stones. They would shave and hollow out the bottom of the post so that it mirrored the bumpy topography of the granite block. So when an earthquake hit, the ground moved horizontally. Because there was no rigid mortar to crack, the entire bathhouse would just slide and rock independently on top of its granite blocks. The friction between the wood and stone absorbed and dissipated the seismic energy. The timber frame above was held together entirely by interlocking wooden joinery without a single iron nail. When the earth shook, the wooden skeleton of the building would twist, flex, and sway. The joints would creak as they absorbed the shock, and then settle right back into place once the shaking stopped. Brilliant, isn't it? There was the changing room, datsuba, the bathing hole, yukushitsu, with a very low ceiling to keep the heat in, and the second floor recreation room where, wearing a fresh bathrobe, you could have a drink and a snack, play shogi, Japanese chess, and socialize to your heart's content. The turnover was high, so the prices were low enough for pretty much everyone, anyone and everyone, to make it a daily ritual. Periodically, clever owners turned the recreation area into fun space with,
Frivolity and blackjack?
okay,
Japanese chess?
okay. The powers that be periodically shut them down because, according to their logic, entertainment in bathhouses should be
Wholesome, classy?
something like that. Let me reiterate, not a single nail anywhere in the country with the best metallurgy in the world. Everything, including the bottom of the pool, was timber joinery, grooves fitting snugly together. Not exactly architecture, but, as I said, extremely clever engineering, in perfect keeping with the environment. Vitruvius would have approved upon some reflection. Then came the 19th century. For hundreds of years, Japanese craftsmen drew and painted people, animals, landscapes, and dragons. Humanity's obsession with dragons is kind of tiresome and childish, but in the Far East, it's almost a cult, which is,
Fatuous.
they drew and painted pretty much the same highly stylized little pictures for centuries. No perceptible development in that area.
Explain.
Okay, let's look at the Italians. 14th century, 15th century, 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century. There's obviously progression here. Styles keep changing, developing, perfecting themselves, moving towards the canon. In Japan, one century looks exactly like the next. And then suddenly, there was Hokusai.
Katsushika Hokusai.
Your erudition is positively overwhelming.
I think so too.
This print of his is now world famous. Notice anything different? Apart from the general masterful technique, the horizon is, well, not low but normal. It's at your natural eye level, between 5 and 6 feet above sea level. Before Hokusai, Japanese artists only produced drawings and sketches in which the author's view is from an elevation, looking down. There hadn't been much development in that area because of the early Japanese take on Confucius. Don't show up your elders. What was good for grandpa should be good for you. Don't be a smartass. Hokusai decided to be a smartass and used a technique that was at that point common over in Europe and the Americas, the natural horizon. Those limited interactions paid off. Some courageous scholars posit he was familiar with certain Dutch lithographs. And then, 30 years later, something dramatic happened that resulted in 4 decades of unprecedented glory. Suddenly, Japan had architecture, an architecture all its own. I'll cover it in detail in the next video. In the meantime, if you enjoy these stories, you can find more of them over on my Patreon. The page features exclusive videos on subjects outside of architecture. Everything from economics to movies to science, religion, space travel, and history. Your subscription directly supports the production of this channel. Thank you for your support. I am Ricky Vernio coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, and I'll see you next Saturday.